Well, we made it. Welcome to the final episode of this season of the Animals Podcast. I'm Ty Magnin, the CEO at Animals.
And I'm Tim Metz, the Director of Marketing and Innovation at Animals.
This season, we set out on a search to meet the AI pioneers, those venturing beyond the hype to succeed or fail spectacularly. Our opening question was simple, but supposed to be pretty profound. It was, hello, is there anybody out there creating real value with AI? Or are we all just shouting into the void? And so we've gone and we've chatted with a handful of founders, marketing leaders, software creators, AI innovators, whatever title you want to give them, on how they're using AI and how they're seeing people close to them, customers, friends using AI. And so today we're going to be recapping what we learned.
Yeah. How do you feel about the question? Did we get the answer? What's the short answer to the question?
Depends. It's complicated. There's no simple short answer, I don't think.
I would say yes, people are creating real value. I think we found some really cool stuff. So in that sense, I think the short answer is yes. I think we went beyond the shallow stuff that we see a lot on LinkedIn and other channels. There's no kind of silver bullet, but I think, definitely we found people creating value with it.
I think the hard part of the question is, though, it's like, how much of the credit for the value created can you attribute to AI? It's not like AI is out there just like running buck wild and doing all kinds of marketing and people are just in the back seat, right? So it's like there are still people. I think maybe we can start by putting the lens on the predictions we made in the first season opener episode when it was just you and I. You said, Tim, that you thought you might see how completely different content formats emerge with AI. Did we hear about any of that?
Maybe not completely different formats, but I would say, I think what Nuka is doing with programmatic SEO is kind of completely different, like something I didn't really expect. I mean, again, I wouldn't maybe call it a format, but yeah. And then also I think Stuart had a lot of stuff that were just like really cool, interesting campaigns that he probably could not have really executed without AI. So yeah, I think we had some glimpses of that. I don't think we literally landed on a new format, but yeah. There were interesting content plays and approaches.
Yeah, I would agree. And as we opened and you talked about vibe coding and kind of how content marketers can create, we created the SEO forecasting tool by using Cursor and AI to create this thing. Like you've proved that out a little bit yourself too. So we can maybe.
Yeah, that's true. If we can snuggle that one in or smuggle that one in.
You predicted it and then you just did it.
You thought we would see some real use cases, especially in SEO.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think we did see with like AirOps and with Copy that they have customers that are doing some SEO work and accelerating that with AI. We did not talk to anybody who advocated for like the spray and pray approach to SEO, which I believe one of my predictions was like, there are going to be companies out there doing spray and pray that we're going to talk to that are seeing some signs of early success. Because I've heard that anecdotally, But what I really was inspired by, and this came through really clearly in talking to Kyle Coleman at Copy AI and then Alex from AirOps, was that you really need SEO experts still with AI in order to produce high ranking, reputable, brand building, lead, generating kinds of content. And that was, I'll be honest, Tim, really refreshing. These are people that own the tools to help produce AI content with as light of a touch as possible, right? Like that's their goal. That's how they make more money. That's their value in the world, not full stop, but within the use case of SEO. And they are humble enough and respect the craft of content enough to say, something so bold as to you need content marketers here. We can't just push this stuff out and expect to have great customer relationships on the other side of it.
I think Parsley was the only one who, it's not spray and pray, but he made a pivot with his whole business because he feels it is kind of on a downhill slope and
true,
less for the long term.
His bet, right? So this is part of the letter drop. They used to be focused on the SEO use case and they've since pivoted into more of a LinkedIn BDR type motion.
But other than that, everybody was quite bullish on SEO, I think.
Impressively so. What are the key themes?
I think one is AI as a writing partner, not a replacement, or AI, you still need to do the thinking. I think that's another way to kind of name the theme. Yeah, it can do some of the brunt work, but you need to do the thinking. you can't replace yourself or people in your team completely. I really loved Ines' quote when Ines from Ali Abdaal, when she said,
the thing that AI is really good at right now is giving us adequate stuff, by which I mean, you look at it and the structure is correct, the grammar's perfect, the flow is good. It's like a cover band that really hits all the notes perfectly, but you're never going to feel that element of like personality, that element of jazz.
I think that's a great way to say it. It's like, and I think it's even a good analogy of like, it's becoming an ever better cover band, but it can never completely by itself be the real thing. Like you need to still ingest that into it.
Totally. That was a memorable quote and metaphor. Nathan at Lex too.
I think it's great for AI to prompt people. And a general principle of ours is like help you think about what you're doing and think through and give you stuff to potentially do of ways to improve it, suggestions. Like when a good editor is like, I'm thinking this. And you're like, they didn't tell me exactly what to write, but you're like, oh yeah, I need to run with that. Like that's a great role for AI to play.
Yeah, you've got to be a strategic, critical thinker in order to produce something that's super valuable. And AI can't really do that. I mean, even the reasoning models of today don't have the context that you have about your industry and so on and so forth.
No, I think that's a great quote. And it also hints at something, though, at the risk that we talked about. We touched on that a little bit with Ines about like, if 75% of writing is thinking, but if AI can take over more and more of the writing, then the risk is that you stop thinking, right? So how are you going to make that space for thinking? And I noticed that, and we talked about it with Ines, where it's like, I go through these cycles myself, where it's like I start to use it more, and then I get my brain get kind of lazy, and then I realize like, oh, I'm not. Like I almost manually need to pull myself out of it and say, I'm gonna sit down with a pen and paper and just write something out before I go into the AI flow. And it's like I found this kind of keeps going back and forth, where it's like you get pulled in and then you like need to pull yourself out. And
another theme: systems and workflows are the new competitive edge. I think it's interesting to think about your AI workflows, especially like for the agency world, like for animals. This feels relevant and here and now. It's like the better the prompting that we can do. I'm not going to say necessarily the better the output, but maybe it's like the more productive we can be, and maybe the better output we can have as well. And so we heard some things from Kyle Coleman at Copy, from Alex Halliday at AirOps that supported this. Kyle described how Copy, they build a lot of their content marketing workflows, of course, on their own tool.
All of the AI workflows that we have guiding our content strategy, guiding our LinkedIn strategy. 70+% of our demand is coming from those channels. Our SEO performance is off the charts.
So in other words, 70% of their demand is like touching an AI workflow at some point. Does that make sense? Yeah. The content they're producing, like the marketing they're producing to get 70% of that demand is coming through their own tool.
Yeah, I think it's funny because we didn't mention it in our season prediction, but we did have this kind of thesis internally already of like workflows are the new IP or workflows are the new work or whatever we want to call it. And it's kind of really validated through quite a few of these conversations. I think also Alex from AirOps, he was talking about like, you might need 30 or 40 steps actually to get to a piece of content, right? And I think that's true. And also that also shows that at some point, if you want to do this at scale, you need a more advanced tool than ChatGPT, because you can't, like, even if you want to, you can't like list out 30 prompt steps in a document and then expect people to use that, right? So it's just
copy paste.
Yeah. In a way, like it changes the skills. Or maybe that's maybe why certain people like working with AI and some don't like it, because it means like it goes like, creating content becomes more of a process driven thing, like kind of an act of creativity. Like the creativity is still there, but there's much more process involved. And for some people, that's really boring or really annoying. And other people might really like that and warm to that, and that comes more natural. So it does completely change the underlying process and requirements for creating content when it's much more workflow driven.
And it changes the team around content creation, right? We've seen people's job titles are starting to switch over to be something like content operations engineer or some version
producer
of that.
Or whatever.
Which basically means like these are the folk that are building these workflows.
But I really liked Stuart's definition. He had like the personality marketer who gathers the source material, the AI content operator, that's kind of the who manages the plumbing, and then the campaign director who thinks quarterly and curates insights. I think it's really cool. It probably will evolve further, but I think that's that's a good first step of how to think about future teams and what kind of skills are necessary.
And just drawing a connection too to what Nathan from Lex shared, he talked about like different kinds of AI coaches, if we can call them that you can have for your writing. You know, you can have like the grammar stick, you know, the copy editor type, and you could also have someone that's like the big idea person. I mean, he sort of talked about how AI can become, you know, it's like a sparring partner, but that sparring partner could have different specialties. You have many different sparring partners, which I thought is kind of in line with what Stuart's talking about. I mean, he's talking about the AI team now versus like the person-based team.
Yeah.
But there's something related there that's kind of interesting to play with.
Yeah, and that's, I think he didn't, like Nathan didn't talk about it in the actual interview, but it's in his annual letter of Lex, which is definitely worth reading. He breaks that down of like, depending on the type of writer, marketer you are, you need AI for different things. So that's he has a really good framework in there, like how to think about it, like what kind of task you should basically hire it for, depending on where your strengths are and what you're trying to do.
Another theme, the rise of personality as an important element within marketing. And then also like relationships. I feel like we've heard this just like macro and listening to marketers in the space in the last 12, 18 months. But we definitely heard it from Parthy. We heard it from Tanuka as well.
So I think over time, many of the pieces of the process, which are just like table stakes, will get automated away. But where there's strategic thinking on how to differentiate against another human that's also using an agent like that, that's where like actually the battle will be fought. I think that's more of what it looks like in the future.
You know, again, going back to what we were just talking about, the different members of the people-based content team, one of them absolutely needs to be like a personality.
I really like Parthy's idea there, where it's like, when we talk about like personality in marketing, I think we almost immediately think like, oh, everybody has to become an influencer, right? So I have to get as big a following as possible. Whereas Parthy was like,
there are two types of creators on social media. There's the influencers, or the people whose goal is to just build as large audiences as possible. At Letterdrop, we do not build for those people. They're very good. They're very talented. There's a lot of craftsmanship. There's a lot of thought that goes into that. And they can figure it out on their own. Our goal is to make the people who don't do anything, and get them to essentially start building trust within their sphere of influence, which is much smaller. They're not going to go viral. They're not going to have 1 million impressions, but they're going to have impressions with the people who matter.
Like, that's not necessary for everybody. The point is you need to reach, if you like, his example is sales, but I think it actually applies to many roles. It's like, you need to reach the people who are important to your business or to your goal. So in sales, obviously, that's like your potential customers. So it's not about like getting as many followers as possible. It's about getting the right kind of followers. And I think that's a nice kind of distinction of like, personality is not just about influencers. It's just about putting more human faces out there for your business.
So definitely something you can lean into there, right? If you're looking for actionable tips coming out of the season, it's like, all right, like lean into those subject matter experts, those spokespeople in the company, or bring some on from outside, giving them permission to have personality, right? Like not just like sanitizing everything they put out and like making them sound like the corporate brand. Like let your people that represent the brand have their own brand. One more theme. The future of search and discovery is changing. Shocking, surprising. No one said search is dead. So thank goodness all of our guests were not just, you know, trying to like get some attention on social.
Alex from Arabs, he talked about like 0-click queries. You know, they are eating into the top of the funnel terms, and that all going to generative search summaries. But at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity in other parts of the search journey to create really unique and compelling content. So I thought that was interesting. We kind of knew that, but it was interesting to see that confirmed. What about you?
I mean, I guess it's like AI can help you write more native content for specific platforms. Like definitely gone are the days of like you create a blog post and then you distribute it with like a title and a link on Twitter, right? And I know that like we're all pretty good content marketers. It's 2025. Like no one's actually doing that. But now we can go even further because AI should give us some productivity to create even more native posts for different platforms, right? For email. We have the opportunity to master some of these platforms or get a lot better at them.
Well, and the same for programmatic, actually, right? I was kind of fascinated by that, how Tanuka talked about it and kind of product they're building. That just opens up a lot more programmatic use cases. that I think otherwise would indeed just be impossible to service. And as long as it's not real spam, I mean, there are a lot of cases where it can actually be helpful and valuable for people, right? Because they have a very specific query that you otherwise couldn't service. So I think that's interesting how he's thinking about it and what they're building to help people do that.
If you were to list your actionable takeaways from this season, give me a couple.
There were quite a lot, actually. I liked Stuart saying, like, don't write your own prompts. The hack behind the hack is don't write your own prompts. Let the AI figure out the prompt, right?
The hack behind the hack there is don't write your own prompts. AI is always going to write it faster and more detailed than you ever could. Give it an example of something you like. Ask it to reverse engineer it for you. And it will spit out something. And then you just try it a couple times. That would have taken you like hours to kind of come up with, make it witty, but not clever. Make it, whatever. You don't know what you don't know. And the AI's job is now just to like fill in the blanks for you.
You know what I stole from Kyle Coleman? I'm using a lot of voice memos now.
Yeah, that's cool. Actually, I've been doing that for a while, but the one thing that I picked up on, I think Stuart actually said that, and I still need to try to implement that in my workflow, which I thought was really good. He actually said that you want to also, in that prompt or that workflow where you turn the voice memo into a post, you want to also tell the AI to pick up on the language and the emotion in the voice memo. And I thought that was actually really smart, because otherwise that really quickly becomes kind of a recognizable template, right? Where it always, but if you can indeed like take some of the randomness from the voice memo and kind of let the AI use that to come up with a different kind of post, I thought that was very clever. The other thing that I had, which is not, it is not something that you can personally apply, it's more at the organizational level, but I thought that's really smart what Alex talked about, like from Arabs, like to do a treasure hunt.
Where does all the frontier opinion live for in your business? Like if you're talking to, if we're talking to a wine merchant, for example, like, okay, so there's probably locked inside that organization some amazing nuggets, whether they're in support tickets or they're in tasting notes or they're in interviews they've done with potential vineyards. And so I love this like treasure hunt a little bit with customers where it's like, okay, like how can we like just start telling me about your business and let's see if we can find some unique little gold veins that we can then go mine, because I think there's sometimes some really great opportunities there that people don't even realize.
So like, yeah, there's so many, any kind of data can almost be interviewed by the large language model and turned into content. What do you think from what we learned from talking to all these pioneers? What do the next 12 months look like?
Well, I think I know where I am on the Gartner hype cycle, right? Like we are in the sort of all right, I think there's a way for us to realize some actual value here. And I think a lot of folks are on that part of the arc now too. We might be a little ahead, and I think like in general, B2B SaaS, our listeners are going to be ahead. So what does that mean? I think over the next 12 months, we're going to see people kind of, maybe stop talking as much and start implementing AI into more and more of the workflows they're taking to create content. I think we'll continue to see learnings and disruption to search in the way that SEO is done. Like I think there'll be some small tweaks there in order for people to optimize for AI overviews. I think the SEO strategies change a bit because, information-based keywords are starting to get sort of sucked up into AI overviews.
We're going to see a lot more custom tools. I think people building their own tools, but especially also for content marketing. I think content marketers are going to figure out that they can just spin up a script or a little tool to do all kinds of, so I think all kinds of little use cases that are part of our work. I think that's what people are going to build tools for, because, you want to solve your own problem. So if you think about starting to learn how to code, you might start with a problem you have yourself. So I think people are some interesting little tools are going to come out. It's going to be larger by the end of the year, probably by teams who really adopt AI well. I think so. Once you really start to figure this stuff out, then you can really accelerate compared to people who haven't figured it out. So, and a personal thing I'm thinking about a lot is like, you see it especially now in coding, but I think you're going to see it in all kinds of areas where like in some ways execution was always the hard part and it's going to be easier. And so I think there's going to be more of a premium on the IDE side. And I think that's going to have a lot of effects, because it means like before it's like, well, you can kind of share your ID in public because anyway, the execution is hard. So who's going to steal your ID, right? But now if anybody can spin up an article or an app or whatever much faster, then your ID is actually going to be more valuable.
It's an exciting time. And it's been a really nice journey getting to spend time with you, Tim, and with all of our amazing guests. Big shout out and thank you to, well, I'm not going to say the whole list, but we've mentioned their names already. And thank you, of course, to our listeners too for joining us and exploring with us.
Yeah, it's been a great way to get their insights and pick their brains. And I'm really looking forward to doing our next season, which will not be about AI.
It will not. Should we tease it? So, yes. We are announcing our next season. It's going to be focused on enterprise content. Basically looking at the inside of the very high walls of enterprise content programs. And the reason why we thought this would be an interesting topic is my own experience at UiPath, leading a large content team at a big enterprise, 3,000 or so people. I just found that for some reason, the gravitational pull at an enterprise is so strong to network within the company and not outside of it. And so my experience at UiPath, from Series B through an IPO was I just didn't talk as much to other enterprise content marketers, and I really would have benefited. And the few times I did, I did benefit from getting to know how how they were set up, their operating model, right? The role of content within their organization, how they structured their team, where ideas came from, how they're measuring performance, all the same stuff that I feel like we talk about pretty regularly when it comes to startups and scale ups, but it's just not as discussed at the enterprise. So we're excited to try and give a forum for enterprise content marketers to learn from one another. And that's what our next season will be focused on. Stay tuned for that. And thanks for sticking with us. We'll see you on the next Animals podcast season.
Bye. Thanks for listening.